You'll wake everybody up.
Street.
Wall Street. St. Luke's Gospel.
She weighs 9 stone 8 pounds.
Hist.
The first prize. My 21st birthday, thou dost.
Stab. Stab.
He was stabbed to death in a fight.
She had been stabbed in the chest repeatedly.
He raised his voice and stabbed the air with his pen.
Severe stab wounds.
A stab victim.
He killed him with a stab to the heart. He felt a stab of guilt. I'll have one more stab at it.
Stabbing.
Stabbing.
A fatal stabbing.
Stability.
Stability.
A period of relative stability.
It could threaten the peace and stability of the region.
Stabilize.
Stabilize.
The patient's condition has now stabilized.
An attempt to stabilize the economy.
Stabilizer.
Stabilizer.
Stable.
Stable.
A wide base will make the structure much more stable.
He is said to be in a stable condition in hospital.
Children like a stable environment.
He was clearly not a very stable person. Actors from the same Hollywood stable.
Stable boy.
Stable boy.
Stable girl.
Stable girl.
Stablemate.
Stablemate.
The Daily Mirror's Scottish stablemate, the Daily Record.
Stabling.
Stabling.
Staccato.
Staccato.
Stack.
Stack.
A stack of papers.
Stacks of dirty dishes.
He's got stacks of money.
The assistants priced the items and stacked them on the shelves.
A stacking hi-fi system.
He went back to stacking the shelves.
The floor was stacked with boxes.
Parents want to know how their kids' schools stack up against others. Traffic stacked up behind the bus. Stacked.
Stacked.
Stadium.
Stadium.
The new Olympic Stadium.
Staff.
Staff.
Our department has a staff of 7. The entire staff has done an outstanding job this year. They employ a total of 150 staff. The staff were very helpful. A strike by ambulance staff. One of our longest-serving staff members.
I'd like to welcome a new member of staff. We were both on the staff of the British Film Institute at the time.
Joan is the only lawyer we have on staff. A staff meeting. The centre is staffed mainly by volunteers.
Staffing levels.
Staffer. Staffer.
Staff nurse.
Staff nurse.
Staff officer.
Staff officer.
Staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant.
Stag.
Stag.
Stage.
Stage.
The early stages of a child's development.
It's a good move at this stage in his career.
We're getting to the stage where we hardly ever go out together.
The team reached the semi-final stage of the competition.
We are now reaching the end of stage 3 of the construction.
The next stage is to complete an application form.
The rest of the money will be paid in stages.
She is on stage for most of the play.
She appeared on stage with George Michael.
I wanted to go on the stage.
Stars of stage and screen. Anne's sculpture took centre stage at the show.
The UN has moved to the centre stage of world politics.
He's an experienced campaigner on the world stage.
Important figures on the European political stage.
Geneva has been the stage for many such conferences.
Will this agreement merely set the stage for another war?
Activists staged a protest outside the Parliament.
Exhibition staged in Paris.
The candidates' public appearances were carefully staged. The candidates' public appearances were carefully staged.
He staged an amazing comeback.
Stagecoach.
Stagecoach.
Stagecraft.
Stagecraft.
Stage direction.
Stage direction.
Stage door.
Stage door.
Stage fright.
Stage fright.
Den suffered terribly from stage fright.
An attack of stage fright. Stagehand.
Stagehand.
Stage left.
Stage left.
He entered stage left.
Stage manage.
Stage manage.
The press conference was cleverly stage-managed.
Stage manager.
Stage manager.
Stage name.
Stage name.
Stage right.
Stage right.
She had to exit stage right.
Stage struck.
Stage struck.
Stage whisper.
Stage whisper.
Stagey.
Stagey.
Stagflation.
Stagflation.
Stagger.
Stagger.
He managed to stagger home.
She staggered back a step.
The old man staggered drunkenly to his feet.
What staggered us was the sheer size of her salary.
He staggered on for another 2 years.
The company staggered from one crisis to the next.
Jim and his wife stagger their work hours so one of them can be at home with the kids.
Staggered.
Staggered.
I was absolutely staggered when I saw the bill.
She was staggered by the directness of his question.
Staggering.
Staggering.
The cost was a staggering $10 million.
The financial impact on the town was staggering. A staggeringly beautiful landscape. Staging.
Staging.
A modern dress staging of Hamlet.
Staging area.
Staging area.
Staging post.
Staging post.
A staging post on the flight from Australia.
Stagnant.
Stagnant.
A stagnant pond.
A government plan to revive the stagnant economy.
Stagnate.
Stagnate.
Growth is expected to stagnate next year.
His career had stagnated.
Economic stagnation.
Stagnite.
Stagnite.
Stag party.
Stag party.
Stagey.
Stagey.
A very stagey manner.
Stayed.
Stayed.
A staid old bachelor.
Stain.
Stain.
Be careful you don't stain the carpet.
This tablecloth stains very easily.
Her fingers were stained yellow from years of smoking.
A cowboy hat stained with dust and sweat.
We've decided to stain the shelves blue.
There was a dark red stain on the carpet.
White vinegar is great for removing stains.
How do you get wine stains out of a tablecloth?
Stained glass.
Stained glass.
Stained glass windows.
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel cutlery. Stare.
Stare.
Jerry ran up the stairs.
I left my briefcase at the top of the stairs. Lisa, he cried from the foot of the stairs.
We walked up 4 flights of stairs.
Lucy sat down on the bottom stair.
Staircase.
Staircase.
Stairway.
Stairway.
Stairwell.
Stairwell.
Stake.
Stake.
They have to win the contract. Thousands of jobs are at stake.
National pride is at stake in next week's game against England.
He holds a 51% stake in the firm. Young people don't feel they have a stake in the country's future.
For $1 stake, you can win up to $1 million.
Climbing is a dangerous sport, and the stakes are high.
We're playing for high stakes here.
Tent stakes.
Drive 2 stakes into the ground about 3 feet apart.
Suspected witches were burnt at the stake.
Ben wouldn't score very highly in the popularity stakes.
That's my opinion, but I wouldn't go to the stake for it.
We're going to pull up stakes and move to Montana.
Kevin is staking his reputation on the success of the project.
Jim staked his whole fortune on one card game.
I'm sure that's Jessie. I'd stake my life on it.
Young trees have to be staked.
A corner of the field has been staked off.
Both countries staked a claim to the islands.
Police officers have been staking out the warehouse for weeks.
We went to the show early to stake out a good spot.
Johnson staked out the differences between himself and the other candidates.
Stakeholder.
Stakeholder.
Citizens should be stakeholders in the society they live in.
Stakeholder economy.
Stakeholder economy.
Stakeout.
Stakeout.
Stalactite.
Stalactite.
Stalagmite.
Stalagmite.
Stale.
Stale.
French bread goes stale very quickly. Stale cake.
The smell of stale smoke. Stale jokes.
Other marriages might go stale, but not theirs.
If you stay in the job for more than 10 years, you get stale.
He was becoming stale and running out of ideas.
Stalemate.
Stalemate.
An attempt to break the stalemate.
The discussions with the miners' union ended in stalemate.
Stalk.
Stalk.
Celery stalks. A tiger stalking its prey.
We know the rapist stalks his victims at night.
She was stalked by an obsessed fan.
Yvonne turned and stalked out of the room in disgust.
Fear stalks every dark stairwell and walkway.
Stalker.
Stalker.
Stalking.
Stalking.
Stalking horse.
Stalking horse.
Stall.
Stall.
A market stall.
Choir stalls.
A good seat in the front row of the stalls.
The car kept stalling. An inexperienced pilot may easily stall a plane.
Quit stalling and answer my question. He was just stalling for time. Maybe we can stall the sale until the prices go up.
We've got to stall him somehow.
While his career has stalled, hers has taken off.
Stallholder.
Stallholder.
Stallion.
Stallion.
Stalwart.
Stalwart.
Old party stalwarts.
Rob's a stalwart of the school's chess club.
Stamen.
Stamen.
Stamina.
Stamina.
You need stamina to be a long-distance runner. Elaine has the stamina and the determination to succeed.
Stammer.
Stammer.
Whenever he was angry, he would begin to stammer slightly.
Ben stammered out an apology.
Jeff spoke with a slight stammer.
Stamp.
Stamp.
A 29-cent stamp.
Richard collects stamps.
A second-class stamp. A date stamp.
A passport stamp.
The speech bore the stamp of authority.
Television license stamps.
He's clearly of a very different stamp.
An angry stamp.
The audience stamped and shouted.
I will not, Bert yelled and stamped his foot.
She stood at the bus stop, stamping her feet. Marta shrieked and started stamping on the cockroach.
My mother stamped off down the stairs. The woman at the desk stamped my passport.
Among the papers was a brown folder stamped Secret.
Stamp the date on all the letters.
The experience remained stamped on her memory for many years. His army years had stamped him with an air of brisk authority.
It was his manners that stamped him as a real gentleman. Officers were given orders to stamp on any hint of trouble.
We aim to stamp out poverty in our lifetimes. Stamp collecting.
Stamp collecting.
Stamp duty.
Stamp duty.
Stamped addressed envelope.
Stamped addressed envelope.
Stampede.
Stampede.
A stampede to buy shares in high-tech companies.
A cattle stampede.
A herd of stampeding buffalo.
Children came stampeding out of the school doors.
Don't get stampeded into any rash decisions.
Stamping ground.
Stamping ground.
Stance.
Stance.
What is your stance on environmental issues? A strong stance against abortion.
The President has adopted a tough stance on terrorism.
A fighting stance.
Stanch.
Staunch.
Stanchion.
Stanchion.
Stand.
Stand.
It looks like we'll have to stand. There are no seats left.
She stood in the doorway.
Stand still and listen to me.
If he stood on tiptoe, he could reach the shelf.
Don't just stand there. Help me. They just stood there laughing. We stood watching the rain fall.
Smiling, she stood and closed the blinds.
She stood back to let him in.
Stand clear of the doors, please. Don't stand in that puddle. A lamp stood on the table.
Near the railway station stood a hotel.
Some remains of the original house still stand.
Can you stand that pole in the corner for now?
I closed the lid and stood the case against the wall.
Stand Molly up on a chair so she can see.
The kitchen door stood open, so she went in.
Scores of derelict houses standing empty.
I'm not too thrilled with the way things stand at the moment.
The evidence as it stands cannot be conclusive.
Where do things stand in terms of the budget?
I will know within the next month or two how I stand. He urged the whole community to stand united and to reject terrorism.
We should stand ready to do what is necessary to guarantee the peace.
Countries that have stood together in times of crisis.
I can't stand bad manners.
I know he can't stand the sight of me.
Lily can't stand working in an office. I can't stand people smoking around me when I'm eating.
She can't stand to hear them arguing.
I couldn't stand the thought of leaving Danielle.
I've had about as much as I can stand of your arguing.
I don't know if I can stand the waiting any longer.
How can you stand Marty coming home late all the time?
She's a strong woman who stands no nonsense from anyone.
Linen can stand very high temperatures.
His poetry will stand the test of time.
What do firms think they stand to gain by merging?
After the oil spill, thousands of fishermen stand to lose their livelihoods.
The car's been standing in the garage for weeks.
The mixture was left to stand at room temperature for 15 minutes.
The train was already standing at the platform.
The trophy stands 5 feet high. John stood 6 feet tall.
His former workforce of 1,300 now stands at 220.
Illiteracy rates are still thought to stand above 50%.
The president stands high in the public opinion polls.
How do their sales stand in relation to those of similar firms?
His book could stand alongside the best.
She announced her intention to stand for Parliament.
Despite protests, the official decision stood.
My offer of help still stands.
His smile exposed teeth that could stand a good scrubbing.
My doctor told me I could stand to lose a few pounds.
We still do not know where he stands on the matter.
You must decide where you stand. I knew from where I stood that the stocks were practically worthless.
At least we know where we stand with Stephen now.
I'd like to know where I stand. It helps to know where you stand legally.
Customers stood in line for 20 minutes at the cash register.
She stood firm, blocking the entrance.
The government continued to stand firm and no concessions were made.
He stands firm on his convictions.
Harry's standing pat on his decision to fire Janice.
Some of the Pacific Islands are too small to stand alone as independent states. For sheer entertainment value, Kelly stood alone.
No industry can stand still.
Time seems to have stood still in this lovely hotel.
You'll stand a better chance of getting a job with a degree.
Maybe their relationship had never really stood a chance.
I always encouraged Brian. I didn't want to stand in his way.
You can't stand in the way of progress.
She's never learned to stand on her own feet. It stands to reason that you cannot find the right person to do a job unless you know exactly what that job is.
The case against him will stand or fall on his own merits. Standing pools of marsh water.
Soldiers stand guard on street corners.
You must stand guard over him at all times.
Gresham will stand trial for murder.
The accused was ordered to stand trial on a number of charges.
The former president stands accused of lying to the nation's parliament.
The radio station stands accused of racism.
Stand tall with your feet comfortably apart. We will stand tall and fight for issues of concern to our community.
This is basic stuff. I can do it standing on my head.
One area of the business which has been stood on its head is internal communications.
Come on, Mal, don't stand on ceremony here at home. Come on, Jack, I'll stand you a drink if you like.
She hadn't the strength to stand against her aunt's demands.
There are only 100 of them standing against an army of 42,000 troops.
We stood around saying goodbye for a while.
I am not going to stand by and see her hurt. I stand by what I said earlier.
He stood by his convictions.
His wife stood by him during his years in prison.
Rescue crews were standing by in case of a breakdown.
Stand by for our Christmas competition.
Police stood by to arrest any violent fans.
He was obliged to stand down as a parliamentary candidate.
What does ATM stand for?
It's hard to tell what the party stands for these days.
She's been lying about me and I won't stand for it.
Would you mind standing in for me for a while?
The outlines of rooftops and chimneys stood out against the pale sky.
She always stood out in a crowd. I'm sure illnesses stand out in all childhood memories. That day still stands out as the greatest day in my life.
3 of the cars we tested stood out among the rest.
The veins stood out on his throat and temples.
We must stand out against bigotry.
I can't concentrate with him standing over me like that.
The men have been stood too.
I've been standing up all day. Stand up straight and don't slouch.
Jim stood up stiffly.
Most of the plants stood up well to the heat.
The memoirs stand up well to cross-checking with other records. Without a witness, the charges will never stand up in court.
I was supposed to go to a concert with Kyle on Friday, but he stood me up.
It's time we stood up for our rights.
Sylvia is capable of standing up for herself.
He'll respect you more if you stand up to him. Cliff couldn't stand up to bullying.
A music stand.
A cake stand.
He adjusted the microphone stand.
A hot dog stand.
An exhibition stand. The shop was crowded with display stands and boxes.
1 week, 3 magazines hit the stands with Peace Corps stories.
The Republicans' conservative stand on social and environmental issues. The Republicans' conservative stand on social and environmental issues.
She was accused of not taking a stand on feminism or civil rights.
We have to take a stand against racism.
In the stands, 50 of Jill's friends and family have come to watch her last game.
Will the next witness please take the stand?
There's a taxi stand on Glen Road.
A stand of eucalyptus trees.